Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to show you 4 ideas for holiday gifts. None of them are expensive, none of them take days to finish, but they all turned out beautiful. If you're new to my channel, my name is Marla and I'm the owner and creator behind From Rust to Roses Vintage. I love to take thrifted items, old rusty crusty items, sometimes even items around my own home that I've had for a long time, and I like to turn them into beautiful vintage decor. I have a mix of styles that I like, but everything leans towards the rusty crusty Victorian antique era with a touch of boho. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please stick around. For project 1, I took a set of Christmas ornaments I had cast a couple of weeks ago using the new Bibelots 2 mold by IOD. And I had decided to make the ornaments a little fancier than they were, so I used the Victoriana mold and cast several of the elements from it and glued those onto these ornaments. I used a fast casting resin to do all of the ornaments. I thought that that would make them sturdier and less likely to chip or break. And I wanted all of the details on the ornaments to really stand out. So instead of leaving them one color and maybe using an antiquing wax, I decided that I would go in and paint the details on each ornament. I used a total of 3 different colors. I believe the colors were Eden and Farm Fresh by Debbie's DIY and Fort York Red by Fusion Mineral Paint. I had a small artist brush for each different color, and in between colors I would just lay the brush on a wet wipe and cover it up lightly, and that way I didn't have to spend all of my time cleaning brushes, and I didn't want to leave them in a glass full of water because then it would water down the paint when I went back to use that particular color. Once I had all of the ornaments painted and the paint had dried, I decided to go in and highlight some of the details with this metallic paint from Fusion Mineral Paint. Now if you watch here, you're going to notice me look at the bottle just to see what color I had. It said champagne, which I thought would be a beautiful metallic, but as I was putting it on the mold, it suddenly started looking very pink to me. Now I'll be honest, I'm very much a traditionalist when it comes to decorating my house for the Christmas holidays. I love reds and greens and a hint of gold here and there. But on my Christmas tree, I like a variety of colors. I have beautiful pink ornaments, purple ornaments, turquoise blue, and the tree is just absolutely beautiful. So as I was painting these, I thought, you know what? I kind of like the way it looks. It gives them a little more elegance and kind of tones down the very stark contrast between the paint and the ornament itself. Now, for some reason, I didn't get it videotaped, but I went around the edge of all the ornaments with a gold metallic paint and then went in and painted the tassels on some of the ornaments with that gold metallic paint as well. I didn't want the back of the ornaments to be plain because that wouldn't look good if they turned on the tree, and so I used some of Debbie's DIY liquid patina and a beautiful pale pink and white plaid paper, and I decoupaged that paper on the back of each of the ornaments. I used some 220 grit sandpaper to get off the excess paper and smooth out the edges, and then I used a beautiful gold satin ribbon to make a hanger for each ornament. I hope you like them as much as I do. For project 2, I went into my stash and found this beautiful round cutting board, and I knew right away that I wanted to decoupage some sort of Christmas winter scene on there. I had several papers to choose from, and in a few minutes you'll see which one I chose. But before putting the paper on, I wanted to paint the cutting board with some Sweet Pickins milk paint. So I used the color Flour Sack. Now as you'll notice, I'm putting it on with a chip brush. I don't really mind that I'm not getting it clear out to the edges or clear up to the top because I want it to look chippy when I'm done. I used a heat gun, or in this case my blow dryer, to speed up the drying and to see if I could get a little bit of crackle in the milk paint. Once it was dry, I applied a second coat and got out my blow dryer to do the same thing. Once the paint was thoroughly dry, I took it outside and I used my hand sander to sand it off, and I loved the chippiness around the edges and some of the chippiness that I got in the middle of the board. I picked out my decoupage paper, which happened to be a print of Santa with one of his reindeer. I absolutely love it, just speaks to me. And I used some water to use the wet method to tear around the edges before putting it on the cutting board. Before decoupaging it down, I laid it on the board and decided if I needed to tear any more of the paper away. I did want that chippiness and the rough edges to show. Once I had that done, I went in with some antiquing glaze and went over the board because, again, I like things to look old and somewhat distressed. I took a wet wipe and went in and wiped back what I didn't want, and especially under the area where the decoupage paper was going to go, because I really wanted the picture to pop. I then sprayed my decoupage paper with water, put it down where I thought I wanted it to be, and then went in with my decoupage medium, which in this case is Pent Art Decoupage Varnish and Glue, and started decoupaging down my paper. Once the paper was down, I went back and made sure that I had a coat of the decoupage varnish on the entire picture. I then went in with one of the transfers from the new IOD holiday transfer books, Yuletide Greetings, and put that at the top. I decided to embellish it a little bit. I had some sprigs of pine that already had the berries attached, so I used my hot glue gun to put those at the top of the cutting board. And then I decided to cover up where the two branches met with a thick jute rope. I used hot glue to go over all the pieces of rope on the back so that they wouldn't fray and would hopefully hold together. And then I put a little red bow I had fashioned out of some ribbon in the middle of the two sprigs. I decided then, instead of using the black leather hanger that came with the cutting board, I wanted the hanger to be jute rope so that it matched. So here I'm just using a little bit of hot glue on the ends and twisting them and trimming them so that they don't fray and come apart. Before trimming off the ends of my knot, I decided to go inside the knot with hot glue to glue it as well. I would hate for this to be hanging on someone's wall and suddenly fall off. I looked at the cutting board when I had all of this done and decided something was missing. Now, I've lived in Las Vegas long enough that this probably would have looked perfect for my wall, but I grew up in Nebraska, and one thing I associate with the holidays is snow. So I went and got my snow paste. This is also made by Pent Art, and start applying the snow paste to those pine branches. I love this stuff. It sticks really well, has a nice little sparkle to it, a little iridescence that you only notice when the light hits it just right. And it finished off this project perfectly. I absolutely love how this breadboard turned out. For project 3, I grabbed 4 coasters that I had picked up while I was thrifting in California. I gave the tops of each one of them 2 coats of Fusion mineral paint in the color Picket Fence. It's a really nice bright white, and at this point I wasn't sure if I was going to decoupage or do something different. But as it turns out, I decided to do something different. After the second coat of paint had dried, I went and got one of the new paint inlays from IOD. This is from the Holiday 2025 collection, and I believe it is called La Folie. I found 2 inlays that were circles, the perfect size to fit on top of 2 of the ornaments. However, there were only 2 of them, so I knew for the other 2 coasters I would have to find something else. However, I wasn't worried about that because this inlay is just full of beautiful, beautiful pieces that you can cut out individually and use them as you see fit. And if you have watched my videos or know anything about me, I absolutely love roses. So I went into the inlay and I found several roses that I could cut out and use on the other 2 coasters. Now, when you're doing a paint inlay, you want to make sure that you have plenty of paint down on the surface before you lay your inlay into it. I always spritz the back of my inlay with water before laying it down into the paint. And once you lay it down into the paint, you want to go around all of the painted surfaces to ensure that they are fully down into that wet paint. Then you're going to let your inlay dry. These took about 30 minutes. They'll get a very whitish color when they're dry. And then you go back and spray the inlay with some water, dab off the excess, wait about 30 seconds, and then you can pull the inlay back. When it came time to pull the inlays off, you can see that with this one I was struggling a little bit. So I went back and gave every coaster an extra spritz of water and dabbed off the excess. Anytime you feel resistance, you need to add some more water and wait a few more seconds. But then you pull it off, and I swear it's magic. You always have to seal in your paint inlays, but I decided that I was going to put some fine line crackle on these, so I'm using step 1 as my sealer. If you use a very light hand, you can seal over the top of the paint inlays without smearing the paint. But if you're ever concerned about that, you can always take them outside and spray them with a clear matte sealer. Once step 1 had dried until it was clear, I applied step 2 and then waited for the cracking to appear. I then used some antiquing wax to go over each coaster so that the cracks would appear, and then I buffed them with a soft dry cloth. And now they are ready for my holiday table. For my 4th and final project, I went out into the garage, into my pile of wood items, and I found this very simple wood hanging. The wood had not been stained or finished in any way. There was just a small saying on the front in white paint. So I took it outside and sanded it, and then gave it 2 coats of Fusion mineral paint in raw silk, sort of an off-white creamy color. I've had this decoupage paper of the 2 deer, I think at least since last year, and I absolutely love it. It reminds me of home back in Nebraska. By looking at the leaves on the paper, I think it's supposed to be fall, but if it is fall, it's very late fall, because as you can see, it looks very white, like maybe it is in the late season when the snow starts to arrive. I use the wet method to go around the edges of the paper since I don't like sharp cut edges, and once I had it sized, I got out my decoupage medium and started decoupaging it onto the board. Now I always spritz the paper with a little water, and I always start with a starter strip to get things laid down and going in the right direction. And it's also important that you go over the top of the paper with whatever decoupage medium you're using. And I continued this process until I had the paper completely down onto my board. I wanted to add some embellishment to this picture, and so I got out one of the new IOD molds. I believe it's called Oak Leaves and Pine, and I cast all of the elements in there and then started arranging them to see if I could find an arrangement that I liked. It took a few minutes, but I finally ended up with some leaves in the upper left-hand corner and some leaves in the lower right corner. Before I attached the leaves to the board, I wanted to make sure I had painted them, and so I chose the color Cobblestone. It's a fusion mineral paint color. It matches some of the gray tones that you see in the picture, but it also has a little bit of a brownish undertone. So I painted each of the leaves in that color, and then when they were dry, I used Type Bond Quick and Thick to glue them down to the board. After getting all of the leaves glued down on the board and giving them time to dry, I took out some antiquing wax and some clear wax and decided that I was going to wax this rather than put any type of top coat on it. Now, while I was doing this, I was certain that my camera was on record, but of course it wasn't. But what I did was give the entire thing a coat of clear wax, and then I went back over it with the antiquing wax, making sure to get into all the cracks and crevices in the leaves and around the edges of the paper and the edges of the board, and then using a soft cloth to wipe back any excess. I hope you love this as much as I do. If you've made it this far, I want to sincerely thank you for sticking around and watching my video. It means a lot to me, and it helps my channel to grow, especially if you give me a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel or share my videos with someone that you think might like them. If you're new to my channel, I try to put out a video every Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I'm also a member of Sonnet's Garden Blooms creative team. Sonnet has a maker's box that she puts out once a month, and so once a month I use the items from that box to make a video. And occasionally, a group that I'm in likes to do a flipping frenzy, and we'll have one of those coming up in October, and then another one in November called Deck the Chairs. So if you like my work, please consider hitting the notification bell so you'll find out each time I have a new video posted. Thank you, and have a great week.